Oh man, the first tariffs are coming into effect, and the markets are reacting extremely fearfully to it. This isn't really being received well in the crypto market, although we are holding somewhat stable. The only thing that's happening now is that countries are slowly starting to act against tariffs. And they're doing it on a large scale. The EU is now preparing tariffs, and China, for example, has already imposed tariffs. Trump reacted very negatively to this, saying we will strike back even harder. And this just looks crazy. I think this topic has now completely reached the mainstream. A lot of people are currently talking about what's really going on here. It's absolutely crazy, friends, and it makes you wonder, will this really have a complete cascading effect? And will everything here just be completely damned to the ground? Since Trump has been in power, nothing has been going the way it should. It was purely a sell the news event, and since then, he really hasn't done us any good. Memecoin, no matter what, hasn't done us any good either. And I'm not like that other YouTuber who now talks up the tariffs or whatever else and sugarcoats it. And everything is supposedly so great, and Trump only wants the best for us. No, but I'm not as negative as other people portray it either. I mean, just look at it. An iPhone costs $3,500 in the Eurozone instead of $1,000. It's completely logical that we can't maintain these tariffs for months on end. It would be much worse for the USA than you can imagine. How is a product like Apple supposed to remain profitable here? People in the EU would only buy Xiaomi or whatever else for a tenth of that price. And that's completely clear, and it wouldn't benefit the USA at all. Supply chains, US technology and so on are also massively weakened by this. That's why, in my opinion, it's completely clear that we can't maintain this level of tariffs for weeks. Look at this. These are the strongest tariffs in almost 100 years. Look at how this is exploding here. I mean, we already imposed tariffs under Trump in 2018, but compared to what we've seen now, that's nothing. Trump has really taken this seriously, but as I said, in my opinion, this should only have a deterrent effect and perhaps encourage some more negotiations, because the USA cannot continue like this in the long run, because it would bring itself into recession, because the economy would suffer, people would have less capital, which would weaken the economy again, and so on. So in the long term, it doesn't make any sense at all. Most of the tariffs are on these Asian countries here, and most of it simply comes from China, Vietnam, and so on. The entire Nike production from the USA takes place in Vietnam. And there we have almost 50% tariffs. Do you honestly believe Nike will now produce in the USA? That will never happen in a million years because Nike would never be profitable then. This will continue to happen in Vietnam, and the tariffs will simply have to be reduced because otherwise it just doesn't make any sense. That's why I'm pretty sure that all these corporations like Nike, Tesla, and so on will put pressure on Trump to lower the tariffs again. But one must understand the bigger picture and understand why he is doing this. Because it currently looks like the plan is working perfectly. And as if this guy is more brilliant than we can imagine. And with that, I don't want to sugarcoat him at all. I'm not a Trump hater, but I'm also not a Trump fan. But let's just take a look at this. This year, 4 same interest rate cuts have been priced in. And you know exactly, previously only 2 interest rate cuts were priced in. 4 would be extremely important. What would these 4 interest rate cuts bring us? More money, more capital for our markets. And these 4 interest rate cuts, which are now being priced in, were only priced in because of the last few days. That means Trump is currently steering the Fed in this direction the way he wants it. The thing with the interest rates and a weaker dollar, that's what Trump wanted from the beginning. And he is provoking that right now. And what he also absolutely wanted, which is probably even more important for the USA, are the US government bonds. Because the USA needs to refinance $7 to $9 trillion this year. This refinancing happens through the yield of government bonds. That means the higher the government bonds are, the more interest the USA has to repay, the more expensive it becomes for the $7 to $9 trillion. That's why they want to push down the yields of US government bonds here. And that can only be achieved if the demand increases here. And currently we see people fleeing from other assets like gold, like stocks, and moving over to government bonds, and the interest rates on government bonds are being pushed down as a result. Exactly what the USA wants, because this way they can refinance their government bonds much more cheaply. And based on this data, I can, for example, already determine that what Trump is doing here is deliberately provoked and is long-term, only well-intentioned. In the short term, we need to see how this affects the next few months, but in the long term, it's very good. We get more interest rate cuts, very good. We have a weaker dollar, very good. We have lower government bonds, very good, because this allows the USA to refinance better, and yet the USA will slowly start with printing money. Moreover, Trump spoke about this exact scenario years ago. It was his plan from the beginning to implement it this way. And sure, it's currently tougher than we imagined, definitely, but it was done deliberately. But as I told you, you can't maintain these tariffs for weeks on end. It's far too expensive, and the USA will only suffer disadvantages from it. Accordingly, we are already seeing the first countries are ready to cooperate. Thailand announced yesterday that they will sit down with the USA to discuss and negotiate the tariffs. Yesterday, Milei, the president of Argentina, also met with Trump to talk about the tariffs. And here too, they are currently in the final stage of preparing everything. And then Argentina will also be tariff-free. So, as you can see, things are being made to seem much worse than they actually are. We also see this in the case of Mexico. For example, Mexico also has no tariffs. And that's only because they were able to reach an agreement with Trump in advance. And this will continue to happen in the coming days. Believe me, these tariffs will not remain as they are. The USA can never afford that. I have shown it to you here. These tariffs are truly absurd. We have never seen anything like this in history, to this extent. This will definitely change. The USA does not want to destroy itself. It is short-term pain for long-term growth. Exactly what Trump has mentioned every time. We can see it in the data. More interest rate cuts this year, very positive. Government bonds are decreasing. Also what the USA wanted. The dollar is weakening. So all of this can benefit us. We also see in the short term that the dollar, for example, is weakening here while we show strength with Bitcoin. What is also positive is that generally speaking, the crypto market is currently holding up well in comparison to the stock market and in relation to gold. Very, very stable. So remarkably stable, which is truly astonishing. And I also wonder myself why we are still standing so stable here. And as I said, folks, I don't want to talk this up positively, but I also don't need to talk it down negatively. Talk. In the past, there have been thousands of events where one should have sold, where something terrible happened, and so on. In the long term, we are oriented here, and in the long term, these few weeks ahead are not that significant. In the long term, nothing has changed. In the long term, we are even better off now than a few weeks ago, I think, because at least now we are pricing in more interest rate cuts and will pursue a loose monetary policy in the coming months, and so on. The only concern is still the recession. We just have to see whether we will experience it or not. But even a mini recession is already priced in by now. That's why I somewhat believe that the worst is slowly behind us. At least, I slowly hope so. Write to me here in the comments. How do you currently see this market phase? I would definitely be interested in that because I think this exchange is certainly important in this regard. Thank you very much for watching and see you next time, friends.